Hi, my name is Sysy Baines. I'd like to introduce you to my presentation on poverty and health. First, we're going to look at the brief history. In 1842, Sir Edwin Chadwick wrote a report on sanitary conditions. In 1849, there was a cholera outbreak killing around 70,000 people. In 1854, Sir John Snow identified Sir Edwin Chadwick wrote a report on sanitary conditions. In 1849, there was a cholera outbreak killing around 70,000 people. In 1854, Sir John Snow identified cholera as not being mere missa, but it was actually contamination in the water. In 1858, William Farr established the yardstick, where he was able to measure mortality rate from district to district. He also set up the life table. In 1870, central government acknowledged that there was a crisis, making it compulsory for all schools, all local authorities to set up schools where they were able to educate children on germs. In 1875, the Public Health Act came into play. All local government were to appoint officers to provide clean water, sewage system, and ensure that food that was being sold was safe to eat. In 1887, Seaborn Rowntree conducted a study in York. Rowntree investigated working class families. He conducted qualitative and quantitative research that classified poverty into two classes: primary poverty and secondary poverty. Absolute poverty is the condition where a person does not have the minimum income to meet the minimum requirements for one or more basic living needs. One or more basic living needs include sanitation, food, clothing, water, shelter, and services and information. Absolute poverty is extreme. Absolute poverty was defined by the United Nations as the grievous, in 1990, as the grievous deprivation of basic human needs. Absolute poverty is not only measured by income, but also measured by the access to services a person can access. According to the World Bank, there's over 700 million people globally living in absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is defined by the United Nations as a person living on £1.90 or less a day. Absolute poverty definition is also identified as if a person or a household have to travel 30 minutes or more for water, if a person does not have access to a toilet or a functioning toilet, if a person doesn't have access to healthcare facility such as prenatal care, immunisations, or care for long-term illnesses, if a child lives in a home with 4 or more people to a room, if a child is at the age where they should be attending school and not able to attend school, if an adult cannot read or write. Also, lack of services, lack of access to media such as TV, radio or computers. Absolute poverty has many causes. Some of the causes are world population. There's 250 babies being born into the world each minute. Natural disasters often cause communities to become destroyed, leaving people with huge food, medication shortages and damaged infrastructure. War, government spending money on machinery and guns instead of spending money on agriculture or building health. Debt is also a huge problem for absolute poverty. Many countries have to pay off their debt and having to cut funding to services. Relative poverty. Relative poverty is the condition where one lacks the minimum income required to maintain an average standard of living in current society. Relative poverty is generally how individual countries' poverty rating is measured. Relative poverty has the ability to adapt over time as the society's wealth expands, the amount of income and resources deemed imperative for the correct living conditions. Some of the standard of living conditions are income, employment, class disparity, poverty rate, housing, hours of work required to purchase the necessities, healthcare, education and life expectancy. There's many causes to relative poverty and change depending on where in the world you live and what society you live in. Inequality of wages is an issue that causes relative poverty. There's a high increase in low paid, which affects those who have lower skill ratings. Job security is something in the UK that we have a problem with. In low paid jobs, this includes 0-hour contracts. The biggest cause of poverty in the United Kingdom rely heavily on benefits. 65% of those living in poverty are unemployed. Inheritance allows wealth to be travelled through generations. Income, old age, those who are over the age of 65, some rely on the state to provide their income. It is clear that there is a pattern between social class and ill health, be it physical, mental or emotional. There's a number of reports to back the point that in health is not only determined by biological factors, but social and cultural factors have a profound effect on one's health outcomes. Diseases and illnesses may vary over time on class, race and culture. There's a clear link between poverty and health, and this has been studied and evidenced by William Farr, Seaborn Roundtree and Charles Booth. These individuals enabled a clear distinction that poverty has an effect on health. The 19th century identified that poverty impacts health and your living conditions, education, sanitation, food and nutrients needed to sustain a physical health and mental health, income, survival to sustain a basic lifestyle, all have an impact on health. Without the basic necessities to maintain these basics needs, most people will be prone to ill health that will impact on mental health, increase anxiety and depression. Stress factors may lead to other psychological or physical health issues. Discrimination has an impact. There's a clear pattern that between class and ill health. This impacts on mental, physical and emotional health. The Black Report, written by Sir Douglas in 1980, identifies social class and ill health, and other reports that highlight that biological and social factors have a profound effect on an individual's health outcome. The macro. The macro is a hierarchy system that filters down to society. The macro structure generates a methodology on how society functions and its expectation. It focuses on large scales. This includes politics, education, culture and family. The macro level consists of large organisations and institutions that possess the legal power of hierarchical coordination inspired by economics. The NHS is a large-scale organisation. The NHS is largely funded by taxes. NHS England control the resources and allocation of services and allocate different departments to monitor and provide services in the UK within the primary, secondary and private sector. The macro collate and analyse data of the social trends and the cultural influences that aid the macro structure. The macro structure is derived from the conflict and the functionalism theory. The conflict theory role in macro has, within history, constructed a divide between rich and poor, political and political authority and dominant cultural expectation, social stratification, group people in socioeconomics, and are categorised in upper, middle and lower class. Functionalist theory adjusts to keep society stable and functioning. Its expectations is that an individual should take responsibility in contributing to society. Micro is the agency. It's also known as the individual. It also looks at the interactions with small groups and social units that exist in society. Micro focuses on the symbolic interaction that are present in an individual's life. This enables research into analysis of the impacts of the services, as well as identify individual interaction with others of social order and changes that are needed in society to sustain a macro structure. The symbolic interactionism theory looks at social behaviour and attitude. This is beneficial in understanding social situations. Example, GP and patient relationship. It creates an understanding of the individual behaviour changing according to events, objects, people and structures. It assigns meaning to things and how they should act accordingly. Some view interaction of some normal behaviours and illness and become reliant on institutions within the community. Micro level can also identify the epidemiology of the disparities with race, gender, culture and geographical disadvantages, which recognises that there is a correlation between the disparities of social advantages and disadvantages which would affect one's health chances. The macro and microstructure has a high influence on the individual than the individual has on the structure. The macro and microstructure shape each other, reinforcing cycles of influence. Political perspectives. The Black Report, completed by Sir Douglas in 1980, questioned how health was distributed. The report touched upon the health status among the social classes, looking at other industrial countries. The report also suggests what further research should be initiated. In the Black Report, there was a table that shows the correlation of mortality rates and the jobs of those who died. The report was disregarded by the Conservative government in 1979. The Black Report quoted Karl Marx and his conclusion about the social inequalities which cause ill health. This was interpreted as a socialist policy, which would demand taxpayers paying money being poured into addressing economic inequality in the UK. The Conservative Margaret Thatcher Secretary Jenkins used the report to state that NHS was a huge expense and claimed that the NHS was not making any difference to inequality. Among all these points, the Conservative government did not view that health issues were due to social classes, meaning that they recognised that people who come from poverty were generally subject to illnesses and more negative social issues like obesity, mental health and imprisonment. However, did not agree that the fact that the wealthier people in the country should aid the poor people financially to combat their ill health. The Conservatives thought that the Black Report especially was supporting socialist views. The Conservatives believed that the NHS was enough to aid ill health to those who could not afford healthcare, private healthcare. The Conservatives' view regarding health is that the less wealthy are more dependent on using the NHS, and that the less wealthy should pay higher taxes as they are more likely to use the services. Another academic research, The Spirit Level, published by Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkinson, the book highlights that inequality has an effect on society. The book shows that for all of the 11 different social issues, outcomes are worse in countries that are more unequal. The 11 different social outcomes are physical health, mental health, drug abuse, education, imprisonment, obesity, social mobility, trust and community life, violence, teenage pregnancy, and child well-being. The authors find multiple direct links between the economical non-equal societies and poor health. The author argues that the evidence is powerful and not only a vertical redistribution of wealth could aid the situation and make societies better. Only a vertical redistribution that the rich give to the poor, and that is the task of the government to deliver. The political group Labour believe health and social issues should be aided through taxes, however believe that the rich should pay higher taxes and the poor lower, as they acknowledge the link between ill health and poverty. Some disagree on what services should be provided and how it should be funded, and all believe that ill health is related to social class, but have alternative views on how to combat this issue. Factors that influence health. There's many factors that may influence the social distribution of health. These are just not isolated outcomes, and many factors will interlink with the needs affecting health. In this current time, we have more health services and support services available, but does not eradicate some of the factors that influence an individual's health chances and the inequality that still exists. Gender. Gender plays a relevant role in health for all men and women. Taken into consideration, biological and behaviour vary according to traditions, culture, race, social structure, education and economic factors that impact on how an individual will access health services. Women tend to live longer than men in industrialised countries. Women are more likely to experience ill health in comparison to men. Women are more likely to suffer from muscular aches and pains, tiredness, depression and anxiety. This is a factor of genetics. The mortality rates in women are continually the cause of cervix, breast and uterus cancers, which most of the time occur from biological influences. The genetic and socioeconomic factors influencing the conclusion that men are less likely to seek medical attention from their GP. Masculinity generates a role in men's health through the stigma that is attached to ill health. Men are more likely to suffer with illnesses such as depression, suicide, diabetes, prostate cancer, heart disease, lung cancer. These create a higher mortality rate caused by not seeking medical advice. The class factor is a social divide in society depending on your status wealth. There is a better status and wealth. There is better opportunity to access the quality of care needed to maintain a healthy life. The class status will also come with a higher level of education that will produce a better chance of financial income. Unlike the NHS, primary and secondary care, there are long waiting times to access services. With private healthcare, there is possibilities to attend appointments when needed and not affecting loss of earnings, unlike those that cannot afford it. Wealth has the advantage to tackle illnesses efficiently and effectively. It also includes the importance of understanding how to live a healthy lifestyle and the benefits. Education. The education system functions in society with an understanding that the education will layer the individual with information and impact that will impact their choice and provide awareness. Education within deprived areas and where population in socio-economic area, individuals may not have the ability to understand and seek the services that they need. Young people are more likely to smoke and participate in drug use. These factors are contributing to the lack of knowledge provided in deprived areas. The health within the education system and community provides inadequate and lack of information and awareness within the society. The Barry and healthcare system results suggest very strong gradients where the better educated have healthier behaviours in every aspect, and some may reflect different access to care.